This is Julio Ricardo Varela with Latino USA, and I'm on the phone with, if you can just say who you are, sir.
Sure, this is Jorge Elorza. I'm the mayor of Providence, Rhode Island.
Thank you so much. So, Mayor Elorza, you just got out of a meeting with, I believe, from what I understand, Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kelly with other mayors. Can you just explain what
Sure,
the meeting was about?
sure. This was an initial meeting where we're building up a relationship to see if we can get some more clarity, and that's what we expressed to the secretary. Was that we found it very frustrating that we haven't gotten clarity on exactly what a sanctuary city is or how they're going to define it, and also on this detainer issue. And so, we asked the secretary to establish this line of communication so that we can get much more precision and details. Because what's happening right now is that you hear rhetoric coming from the White House and also from the Attorney General that's all about crime and criminals, and you hear from mayors. We're talking a different language. Of course, folks who are committing violent crimes, they should be arrested, and if they're undocumented, they should be deported. But as mayors, our main interest is making sure that our cities are safe. And, we have many undocumented immigrants who are living in our communities that are living otherwise law-abiding lives. They're simply going about their business and want nothing but what's better for their families. And so we want to relieve some anxiety and fear that they're feeling as well. And so how can we have one conversation so that we're not talking past each other? Because at the end of the day, we all have the same goal. That's to keep our streets and our cities and our country safe. And along with that, we want to make sure that we're focusing every resource that we have at every level and targeting the most violent criminals, folks that should be off of the streets. So since we have that common goal and that common purpose, let's make sure that we're defining terms, we know where we stand, and figure out how we can work together to accomplish that goal.
So, what did the secretary say when you guys asked that? What was the reaction? I mean, what can you share?
So he was very receptive to that message, and frankly, he's a military man. He's not a political person. He spent his entire life in the military, and so he's mission driven. He's results oriented, not political. So what you hear from Attorney General Sessions, with an anti-immigrant agenda, the language and the message that he communicates was very different than what we heard today from Secretary Kelly. This was much more measured, and it was all focused on public safety. And frankly, there's a lot of heated rhetoric and a lot of unnecessarily inflated rhetoric that we hear around immigration. We didn't have any of this during this conversation. It was how do we focus most of our resources so that we can get truly bad people who are committing violent crimes off the streets, and if they are undocumented, make sure that they're deported as well. While at the same time letting folks know that if you're living your life, you're not committing any crimes, you're simply working and or studying and providing for your family, that you are not a priority. So we want to work to alleviate a lot of that anxiety and fear that exists in the community as well. So this was a very good first step to establishing that communication. As a next step, what we'll be doing is at the staff level communicating with his team at DHS to get more clarity on this question of sanctuary cities and how it's defined, and even and also on the issue of the use of non-judicial warrants, detainers that are being issued by ICE, and how we can get more of a priority given to the folks who are committing violent crimes, to make sure that if ICE wants us to detain them even further, that they be accompanied by a judicial warrant.
Right. So, just two more questions, Mayor. The first one actually has to do with the detainer report. Do you feel ICE is presenting the information accurately, or I mean, on the ground, what are you hearing? Do you feel like the federal government is misinforming the public in a lot of ways?
About what?
About the convictions and how many immigrants, undocumented immigrants, are actually committing crimes, or do you think they're painting a picture of of these crime-infested communities that don't reflect the reality of a city like yours or others? And if so, why?
What I think is so unfortunate about this whole conversation on immigration, President Trump began his campaign virtually equating immigrants, Latinos, and criminals. And there's been so much unnecessary and heated rhetoric on this that could have completely avoided much of these issues. So as mayors, we're focused on being practical and getting things done. Now, we have two goals. The first one, and perhaps the most important, is always to keep our communities and our residents safe. And if that means focusing our scarce resources on going after violent criminals, then we want to do that, and we're going to resist and we're going to push back on any effort that keeps us from keeping that laser focus on them, and instead has us asking or detaining folks for not putting a blinker or for committing, really minor civil infractions. Our local police department simply will never be federal immigration agents. We're not going to allow that. The other piece of this is, in the raids or the roundups that they've had over the past couple of months, it's also very concerning when they pick people up who don't have any criminal past. They just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure of the value that this has to them operationally or mission-wise, especially when all it does is it sends people further underground. We're seeing people much less willing to call the police department to report crimes, to report that they're victims, or to cooperate as witnesses. It makes us all less safe if we're continuing to send this panic and fear and anxiety throughout our communities. So those are our two priorities as mayors throughout the country. We wanted to express that to him and urge him to please give us some clarity, give us details. What exactly do you mean when you use these terms, so that we're not talking at cross purposes and we can focus how to work together to keep our streets safe.
So do you think he got the message? I mean, you said that he had a different reaction or compared to Attorney General Sessions. How are your colleagues or your fellow mayors who were at that meeting? What's sort of the word? I know you mentioned next steps, but do you think Secretary Kelly understands the perspective that you guys bring?
So I can only speak for myself, and what I will say is that at least for an initial meeting, he seemed very receptive to the message that we were communicating. And so, we look forward to continuing the conversation with him and with his staff to make sure that they understand, at a very acute level, the kind of impact that using certain phrases or enacting certain policies or issuing certain threats have on our local communities. So we're going to continue that dialogue. As of now, he seemed very receptive to our message. Time will tell with the follow-up, but we look forward to a constructive relationship, because at the end of the day, we have the same goal of focusing our energy and our resources on people who are committing violent crimes. We can all agree to that. Every city in the country already complies with and cooperates with ICE and with other federal agencies when it comes to getting the most dangerous people off of our streets. So let's keep the focus on that. And let's make sure that we're defining terms very precisely so that we know where we stand and we know exactly where each side is coming from.
Right. And one follow-up question, Mayor. Attorney General Sessions claimed that he would remove Department of Justice funds for any quote-unquote sanctuary cities. How would that affect Providence specifically, or are you concerned about that, or what are your law enforcement officials saying in your city?
Sure. I mean, every city throughout the country is concerned about the threat and about the possibility. But the truth is that every city in the country does indeed comply with ICE and with other federal agencies. So it's really up to them to define, what do you mean when you use the term sanctuary city? Mm-hmm. Whom is it that you're going to target for withholding funds? We've done a lot of research on this, and we've spoken with a lot of attorneys, and they've all told us that it's very unlikely that they'll be able to withhold funds given the existing policies in virtually every city throughout the United States. So we feel that we stand on strong legal grounds, and any attempt to withhold federal funds based on our current policies would be patently unconstitutional, and we will challenge it in court.
Mayor, thank you so much for your time.
Great, thank you.
Have a good one.